Webhooks. What the heck are they, and how do I set them up? I'm Scott Valler, Senior Solutions Architect and Consultant with Excalibur Data Systems. Let's start with enabling webhooks so that your system is ready to listen for an incoming call and accept some data in so that it can run a OneStep. That's essentially what a webhook is. To get started, we're going to fire up the server manager and flip over to Cherwell Service Host, and we're going to configure that. We have to go into the advanced settings, and we're going to turn on the System Event Processing Service, the bottom one here. I have it on right now because I already have it set up. By default, when you come in, it's off, and you'll need to turn it on. If you're hosted, you'll want to go ahead and call support and have them turn it on for you. The next step is to set up security. We're going to go into the administrative tool and edit the security groups. The anonymous browser group has to have rights to view the webhooks. We want to make sure that we've set up the REST API URL. So we're going to go into security and edit the REST API client settings. Up here under File, we'll see the Set API URL. If you're hosted, support will take care of this. If you're on-prem, you would have set this up when you upgraded or when you configured your system. We enabled the service, we set up security, and we made sure that the REST API URL is good to go. Now we just have to configure a webhook. Two ways to do that. First is to come into browser and mobile over to the webhook manager. The other is to go into a blueprint, and under managers at the bottom you'll see webhooks. The endpoint extension is what is my custom URL endpoint name. Specifically, if you look down here, here's the URL up to the API, which was our REST API URL base, and then Cherwell adds webhooks onto it, and then after that is our endpoint extension, so customer username / customer username. If I were to add additional characters, that becomes my custom URL that the webhook has to call into. So if Jira is going to update this ticket for the customer username, it needs to call that full URL and then pass the data. Every webhook has to have a unique custom endpoint extension. It has to be unique. You can come over here and copy this if you want off to the clipboard. Authentication. So when Jira or that external service calls into Cherwell to fire this webhook off, how's it going to authenticate? It could be none, completely anonymous connection, or it could be a basic connection. This is where we use a shared secret. So we've got a fixed username and password that I type in here so it knows how to talk. The next section is actions. What do I do once I've successfully accepted that call and received a data packet from the outside service? And in Cherwell, you're going to run a OneStep. For every culture, you'll have to create a unique webhook. Let's go take a look at the OneStep that I'm firing when I get that incoming call and the data comes in, whether that's an XML or a JSON packet. One of the use cases I find is if I'm running my PowerShell over on a trusted agent, pushing data back in through the webhook is a really great solution. Side note is that the webhook is asynchronous. The webhook is essentially running in the queue. So when the call comes back in and it gets picked up and processed, it then drops an entry into the RabbitMQ and is waiting for it to be picked up and processed. So there is going to be a delay between the reception of that incoming call and the action that gets taken. And in this case, what I've done is I've created 3 variables just to capture the username, the record ID, and the results. And in order to get to that data, we have a body variable. So if I right click, you'll see that there's a webhook content and there's a body. That special token is provided because we're doing a webhook OneStep. As a side note, if I come over here to the conditions of the OneStep, if I was building this outside of the webhook manager, I could come down here to show custom tokens, and I could flip it from none, which is what a traditional OneStep would be, and flip it over to webhooks so that that body webhook token becomes available to me as I'm building this OneStep. Because the OneStep is not unique to the specific webhook you built, it's just a OneStep. I could link this same OneStep to multiple webhooks. Let's go look at the modifiers. In order to use this variable that's coming in, I'm using JSON in my example. I could have done XML. I have to tell Cherwell that it's JSON. And then I have to go pull the path value that I want. So in this case, I'm looking for the username, so it's going to pull it back. I could have instead come down here and said that this is a JSON object, dropped it in, and then configured it as I went. My result is a success or failure. So if the action that I was taking over in my third-party system failed, then I wanted to go ahead and grab that and pass that forward through the webhook so that Cherwell could take some additional action when I was originally building this out. So the next step is to come in here to test. I had created in advance a JSON object that holds the username with the value I want to pass, the rec ID, and the result. So I'm just going to copy that over. I could type it in there too, no big deal. And when I hit run, it's going to execute the OneStep with this set of data, and it's going to go do it. It's not just going to pretend. In this case, I got a success. If it failed, it would give me some kind of an error. So right now I know that the OneStep processes the sample incoming data correctly. That doesn't test listening and then processing. It just lets me know that the OneStep worked and that it handled the data pass through. Let's go to the rich client, see this thing in action. So I've just got a OneStep up here that's going to fire out and trigger that back. What you just saw pop up was the result of the PowerShell script and the call to the webhook. Normally, I don't display all of that. You'll also notice that Emma's network ID updated. So there was a slight delay between the moment that the webhook finished and this record refreshed. Let's go look at the OneStep that's triggering everything. I kept it super simple so we don't have a whole lot of noise. First thing we're going to do is write out the script before we fire it off. This is the PowerShell script that's going to do all the work, and it is super simple. I have the endpoint URL here, which is what we got when we set up our webhook, and we had that custom endpoint name right here. I'm building the JSON object right here, and this is what that sample looked like when I had it nicely formatted visually, the one that we tested with earlier. And the call is right here. That's it. That's all there is to it. We're going to invoke the web request, and we're going to use the post method. I'm telling it that I'm passing JSON data. If I was doing XML, I would use the appropriate call out there. I'm passing my message, and I'm telling it which endpoint address to connect to. That's it. So I'm using the web request to give me a little bit more data on the result of the connection and the interaction. Super, super simple. Webhooks are not hard. I hope this quick introduction to how you set up webhooks and how you use them is helpful to you. If you have any questions, please reach out. We'd be happy to help you. Thanks for watching and have a great day.